to this morning's Legislative Forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Johnson County. Right now, I'd like to ask you to silence your cell phones as we get started here. My name is Kelly Teeslink, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Johnson County. The League is dedicated to educating voters on political and ballot issues, and we encourage informed citizen participation in government. Membership is open to both men and women ages 16 and older, and we invite you to join us. There are brochures about the League on the table out in the lobby, and plenty of League members here if you have any questions for them. So these forums are designed to give local citizens an opportunity to discuss current state legislative issues with their elected officials while the legislative session is underway. The co-sponsors for today's forum are the Iowa City Federation of Labor, United Way of Johnson and Washington Counties, Hawkeye Chapter of ACLU, Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition, and Iowa Shares. So now I will introduce our legislators. For our senators today, we have Senator Joe Bokum for Senate District 43, Senator Kevin Kinney for Senate District 39, and Zach Walls for Senate District 37. And our representatives today, we have David Jacoby, representative for House District 74, Amy Nielsen, representative for House District 77, and Mary Masher, representative for House District 86, and Vicki Lensing, representative for House District 85, is unfortunately unable to attend today due to commitments for her other job, and Bobby Kaufman, representative for House District 73, is currently, his cows are calving apparently, so he is unable to make it today too. All right, I'll talk a little bit about some logistics. We're going to start with 5-minute summaries from each of our legislators on recent legislative matters of interest to them individually. And we will start with Senator Bokum.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here, and thanks to all the co-sponsors, especially the League of Women Voters, for bringing us together. So I'm going to start off and end with some good news and sandwich some negative news in between. So, kind of get going, and then we'll talk. First, on Tuesday, the Senate Democrats retained a seat in Cedar Falls. Eric Giddens won a special election. We're really excited about that, to have 18 members of our Senate caucus this last week. We've been doing a lot of voting, and we only ever get up to 17. So it'll be nice to have another vote. Kind of a crazy week. I mean, it's been a long month, really, but the last week, the Republican Senate wrecking crew was pretty busy. On Monday, we did a solar bill that's been brought by Mid-American Energy that's going to result in killing a whole bunch of solar jobs here in our part of the state. We've seen just an explosion in a number of jobs and business, people putting solar on their farms, on their homes and businesses. We passed a bill that's going to make that harder to do at a time when we need more renewable energy, and we need jobs all over Iowa. If you look at kind of where the solar jobs are, they're in places where we say we need more jobs in the rural parts of the state. That bill now goes to the House. That was Monday. On Tuesday, we took up a bill dealing with Medicaid work requirements, trying to get after poor people who get health care coverage. These are adults, basically 18 to 64 years of age, that are part of the Medicaid expansion program, the Iowa Health and Wellness Program. And we passed a bill to make people do reporting requirements around work. And where this has happened in at least one other state, thousands of people have gotten kicked off their health care simply because they were not able to navigate the reporting system. So that was Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, we moved a bill that would make it harder for the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation to do flood reduction and water quality projects with kind of this arcane state revolving loan fund, which they use essentially to try and finance conservation deals where a farmer or a private landowner will sell property, mostly marginal ground that is turned into wetlands or other water quality and flood reduction projects. And we've restricted their ability in the Senate to use that fund at a time when Iowa is under just massive assault from floods that we are going to see probably through May. It's not any time to be reducing our effort there. These projects generally end up in public ownership after Natural Heritage makes the purchases. They go to county conservation boards or the Iowa DNR to add public lands for hunting and fishing and just outdoor recreation, which I think was really kind of the heart of the issue. There's folks that would like to see less public lands being available for Iowans. So that's the week. Next week, there's going to be I'm working with a couple Senate Republican members on making some fixes to our kind of broken medical cannabis law in Iowa. We still have hardly any of the sick people that need and would like access to legal, safe cannabis, getting access to it. And so there's an effort in the Senate and actually in the House for the first time in kind of a light of day process in the House with House Republicans, I should say, to try and fix that law. So I'm ending on that as the positive note. I'm looking forward to your questions. Thanks for being here.
Well, good morning, and thank you for being here. As a collective group, we're the suckers who didn't get to go on spring break. Is that what it is? Well, everybody else did around us, so that's right. My name's Dave Jacoby. I serve House District 74. I'm the ranking member on Ways and Means. I also serve on Economic Growth, Commerce, and Natural Resources. The first funnel is over, so we're seeing some activity coming through Ways and Means. One of the things we just dealt with this week is fantasy sports or sports betting gambling, a new venue for that in Iowa. Just a quick overview of that. If we look at expanding gambling, the taxation rate for that is set at 6.75, which is considerably lower than the casino. Some of the casino betting rate is actually set around 22%. So it's interesting that we're starting that discussion at 6.75. Now, the bill did move through state government and then on to Ways and Means. In Ways, we did make some improvements to it. One of those improvements to sports betting is not allowing voting or betting on individual Iowa College players. In other words, if you wanted to place a bet on whether Iowa beats Iowa State, and that would always be my bet, but if you wanted to bet on Iowa beating Iowa State, that is a legal bet. But you could not make a bet during the game or on an individual during the game that Joe Bolkin would not make the front end of a one-on-one. And that's where we wanted to, Joe would make it, but we want to make sure that individuals aren't affected by that gambling techniques, because it'll be much quicker moving online than it ever was before, requiring people to walk in to casinos. Now, it did make it out of state government on basically a party line vote. It came out of Ways and Means with 3 or 4 Democrat votes and 2 Republicans voting against it. It has quite a distance to go before it would reach the Senate and or the governor's office. Also, in the span of 8 days, we did work on a constitutional gun amendment and children's mental health. Go ahead and tie the two together. And then we will continue to work on some property tax bills coming through Ways and Means. The one we're looking at right now would severely hamper both our 411 systems and our IPER system. It's House Study Bill 165. And that would also limit or cap property taxes at a 2% increase each year. But remember, if it caps it at 2%, it also caps the valuation of your homes. So the valuation of your home could not go up over 2%. I know every time you talk about Ways and Means and taxes and property tax rollbacks and those interesting things, the only thing that rolls back are people's eyes. But it is important, and I'm glad. I know, well, hey, I didn't get to go on spring break, so you have to listen to my bad joke. Yeah, my daughters did. But as always, look forward to your questions this morning.
Thank you. Representative
Thank you, and thanks everyone for coming this morning. Thank you to the league for sponsoring this. You were patient out there waiting to get in, and I'm glad we had everybody stay. I was hoping that that would occur. Thanks to all the sponsors today, too. I hope we can address some of the concerns that you might have, and if there are things that we don't talk about, please bring them up in the question part of this discussion. Can't go on without saying go Hawks. We got women and men both to cheer for this weekend and hoping they continue on. I had my grandsons with me this week for spring break at the Capitol, and it's always interesting to hear the perspectives of seventh graders who are 13. I take one of them the first part of the week and then the other one the second part of the week, and they sit in on some of our discussions, and they sat in on a caucus this week regarding guns and gun legislation that was pretty animated. And so they asked me, "Does that happen all the time?" And I said, people care deeply about these issues, and whenever that happens, then people get pretty passionate about what they have to say and their point of view. And so, yes, and I said, I'm glad that we have people who care about those issues enough to invest that time and energy into it. I did want to talk about the Children's Mental Health Bill. Dave mentioned it. And it is something that is extremely important. We've been working on this legislation for over 30 years. That's how long it's been since it was mentioned that we need a system in place, and the actual bill that we have been looking at that will put something in place in terms of the framework. I voted against it. I know Amy did as well, and our concerns are about the money. We don't know where it's going to come from. I see Mike in the crowd, and one of the things that we've been worried about is the county levy, and the fact that if we put the county levy on top of what we've already got for the adult system, I know, Pat, you're going to be concerned about, are we going to have enough money to fund the adult system and the children's system with our current levies, even if we raise the cap? And they've talked about taking our federal dollars, our block grant monies, and giving that to the county regions. The counties have said, we don't want that. It will create problems for a lot of our providers. And if the providers go under, there aren't services to be able to offer that anyway. And so those are the concerns we have about how is this going to be funded. Because if we don't come up with a funding formula that works, we're going to have two failed systems, the adult system and the children's system. So those are the things that I think we need to really be thinking about and taking the time to do it right. I initiated a meeting with the governor this week on childcare. And I thought it was important in light of the fact that we have a worker shortage in Iowa, and a lot of those workers are women who are staying home because they cannot find good quality childcare in their area. Dawn Oliver with the Iowa Women's Foundation has been working on this and has been doing some phenomenal things with different communities on how they can address that shortage. And one of the things we wanted the governor to do was to get it on her radar in terms of her Future Ready Iowa initiative, because we need to identify that as a shortage area, and we also need to identify that the wages need to be better in order for us to keep those child care providers in the system. They oftentimes take care of their kids when they're young, and when they get school age, they go back into the workforce where they can get a good paying salary with benefits, retirement, all of those kinds of things that they don't get when they're a private home care provider. So those are the things that we've been trying to address, and I know Dawn is going to be bringing up a number of businesses that have created child care centers in their business, and again, looking at how they went about that and how we can incent businesses to do that across the state. So that's the things I wanted to mention today. We're also working on rental caps. Currently, Iowa City and Ames have created rental caps in neighborhoods. Basically, it's saying that you are not going to have a certain percentage of your housing in that area rentals. We want to provide more home ownership with people and invest in our neighborhoods. And when you have too many rentals, it becomes a problem, especially in college towns. And that's why Ames and Iowa City are affected by this. We're working with the realtors across the state and trying to identify how do we move forward with providing a bill that doesn't create more problems for our cities, but at the same time addresses the concerns about property rights and owners' rights to be able to sell their businesses. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Senator Kinney?
Hi, I'm Kevin Kinney. I have Senate District 39, which you're in, Senate District 39. Then I have Western, Southern, Johnson, Washington, and Keokuk County. There's a lot of bills moving. I am the ranking member on Judiciary, and I think we wound up having 140 bills before the first funnel just in that committee. I'm also ranking member of Agriculture, and we need some more help in Des Moines and get some more members up there, because when you start serving as ranking member on multiple committees, it gets to be very hectic, especially our judiciary. One of the things that I've been working on over the last 3.5 years has been the industrial hemp. That came through Ways and Means a week ago, is coming to the floor on Monday in the Senate, and hopefully it'll be on its way. It's working its way through the House. I believe Dave says it's gone through Ways and Means
On Monday.
over there, and then it'll be ready for the floor over there. We've been working together with the House and the Senate trying to get the language right. There is some differences within the bill, but the basic concept is the same. So that hopefully 3.5 years of work, hopefully will finally come to an end, and we'll be able to grow industrial hemp. And to me, it's an economic engine out in rural Iowa, especially. I've been talking with companies from both coasts, East and West Coast, Canada, wanting to come here to relocate. Because hemp is so fibrous, it would be an astronomical figure for them to start shipping it to their production facilities in other states. They would rather bring the production facilities here. And that's one of the things that I'm excited about. You know, it would be good paying jobs out in rural Iowa. And it would give the farmers an alternative crop in which they can grow. On the judiciary side, there's a lot of bills that are moving, and one of the bills, there's a number of bills, and I tend to get most of the law enforcement bills. The increased penalty for misconduct with offenders, peace officers' misconduct with persons in custody. It's would be now become a felony if a police officer, correctional officer would wind up having a sexual affair or sexually assaulting an inmate. And it wasn't before. Now it would be a felony. Some of the other things, one of the biggest things that I was looking at is dissemination of material to a minor or a parent by a parent or guardian. We've had a couple instances. There's actually 2 cases that come out of Johnson County here where a parent who was a sexual offender, was on the sexual offender registry, was grooming a child by showing them very pornographic material. And there is a loophole that parents can do this because of their right and standing as a parent. I had introduced legislation that's going, we're taking this exemption away. To me, you're grooming that child, and it's something that needs to change. It actually was expanded in the Senate by the Republicans, not to allow any parent to show some of the very hardcore pornographic material to a child. I don't know if it will pass the House. I felt it would in the form that I had introduced it, but that's something that I really feel that needs to be addressed. I had a person that I helped put in federal prison that was grooming their own daughter. It didn't come from my Senate district, but it came from an adjoining county that I helped work on the case. And the father started sending, as soon as he got off paper, got out of federal prison, got off paper, he started sending this stuff to his 14-year-old daughter. And it was something. So it's something that I really felt needed to be addressed.
Senator Walz.
Well, first of all, thank you to the League of Women Voters and all our sponsors today for hosting us. Senator Bolka mentioned a special election up in Cedar Falls. I know we also had a special election here in North Liberty. I don't think I see Councilor Rakisha here today, but just want to extend my congratulations to her for her victory. We just finished our second week of floor debate in the Iowa Senate. It's my 10th week on the job, so I'm still learning, but I've mostly figured out where the coffee is, how to file amendments, how to speak on the floor, all that good stuff. And wow, 2 weeks, we've passed a bunch of bills out of the Senate that are pretty scary, and we got a couple more on the way that I'm hopeful about. So I just want to kind of do a quick recap of where things are. Probably for me, the biggest bill that we passed so far out of the Senate was the changes to how Iowa nominates our judges. This is going to be the injection of politics into a court system that was approved by the voters in 1962. Representative Masher said this morning at our forum that we had before this one that hopefully they will have the votes to stop this in the House. That would be a very good thing. I've been really concerned about these changes to our judicial system since they were proposed, and I've been speaking out against them, and I hope that you'll contact your representative and encourage him or her to vote no if this does come onto the floor of the House. We had a brief discussion of the gun bill. Representative Jacoby mentioned the proposed constitutional amendment in Iowa to take federal Second Amendment language, place that into the Iowa Constitution, and then turbocharge it with what's called strict scrutiny language. For those of you who are not attorneys, and I'm not one either, so I had to have someone explain this to me, it's critical to understand the strict scrutiny does not apply to guns. It applies to laws that will regulate guns. And so when you hear the phrase strict scrutiny, and if you start looking for that phrase in the coverage around this bill, you will start to see it pop up over and over. That means that if this constitutional amendment is enacted, every law that we have on the books in our state will be under this strict scrutiny examination, and we could very well repeal background checks for gun sales in the state of Iowa. You could have permitless carry in our state. There are only 3 states in America that have that kind of strict scrutiny language in their state constitution. And I believe every single Democrat voted no on that strict scrutiny language. And I think that we all voted yes on putting traditional Second Amendment language into the Iowa Constitution. Iowa is actually only one of 6 states that does not have that. But we would be joining a very select and I think negative club if we put this strict scrutiny language into our Constitution. So I just want to put that on your radar. If this constitutional amendment advances, you'll be hearing a whole heck of a lot more about it. But that strict scrutiny language is something to watch out for. Senator Bolka mentioned the solar tax that you've probably all gotten some mailers. You've seen the TV ads, the Instagram and Facebook ads from the Real Coalition, whoever the heck that might be. There's also some conversation coming about figuring out how to this tax on electric vehicles, because if you drive an electric car, you don't pay the gas tax. So there's now some conversation, well, we got to tax electric cars to pay for our roads and bridges. I understand the concern with that, but I don't think that we should be taxing a electric car in the way that we're taxing, like a Chevy Impala or whatever, right? There has to be some kind of other way of doing it other than what's currently being proposed. So I'm working on that in the Transportation and Ways and Means committees. I'm really concerned about the changes to our Medicaid program. And again, the concern is not that folks shouldn't be working if you're able to, or shouldn't be engaged in your community somehow. The concern that we have is how that work is reported. In the state of Arkansas, 18,000 people have been kicked off of their health insurance because they have not been able to properly report the work or volunteering that they are doing. And so that's the really big concern that we have. Republicans didn't seem to think that was an issue. They pushed it through on a party line vote. Really worried about that. The other bill that I've been watching that I was really worried about in education was vouchers. There was this passed out of the Senate Education Committee, private school vouchers. Thankfully, it sounds like it won't come up to the floor, so I am glad about that. A few positive things. There is an animal welfare bill that's working through the Senate and through the House at the moment. You might have seen in the paper last week, the AG busted up this big puppy laundering ring. So thankfully, we're going to be giving the folks more tools to go after those kinds of bad actors. Really excited about that. We are working to extend the Save Penny sales tax. That's coming out of the House. We're trying to take that up in the Senate here pretty soon. Senator Kinney mentioned the hemp bill. My first piece of legislation I filed, unfortunately, died in subcommittee. I wanted a plan to get Iowa to 80% renewable energy by 2030 and 100% by 2050. Unfortunately, that was voted down in the Senate Commerce Committee, but hopefully we'll get that going next year. And then finally, I'm still working on a bill to try and get more money available for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in the state. It's an issue that I hear about from Coralville in Johnson County to Clarence out in Cedar County. We need more money for affordable housing. It's an urban issue. It's a rural issue. And we need some more funds for our shelters. So I'm working on that. We'll see if it goes anywhere. One just very short, last quick anecdote. We had a young gentleman named Timothy at the Capitol this week. He was here to talk to me about the Iowa Humane Society. And Timothy grew up with two moms. And I think it was the first time in the Iowa legislative history that he was able to talk to somebody else who also grew up with two moms. And so that was a very nice moment for me, and even though it's sometimes tough, that was a very, very nice moment.
That was nice.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and all of our sponsors. Welcome to District 77. It's great to be home and incredibly comforting that the clock still doesn't work. So some things never change.
Don't you just take it off and put a battery in it?
I don't know. It's never had the right time on it. I don't know. This is a new clock, still doesn't work, but I had knocked the old clock off the wall a couple times in here. Things got rowdy. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. The only thing that I think we didn't address was the Religious Freedom Restoration Bill that we debated. Basically legalizing discrimination. I don't think we need a whole lot more explanation on that. It was a bad bill. Of course, it passed on party lines and predicated on a false premise. So to think that we don't actually have religious freedom here in Iowa is pretty ridiculous. And the fact that we want to codify discrimination is even worse. So I'm just going to stop and let's get to your questions since we got a little bit of a late start here. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of your updates. At this time, we will begin with questions, starting with one from the league and one from each co-sponsor, followed by questions from the audience. In order to maximize the number of questions, you will be timed. Polly Horton, league member, is the timekeeper today. Thank you, Polly. You have 1 minute to state your question. If after 1 minute you have not stated your question, I will prompt you to do so. And also, please be respectful. As you come forward, please speak directly into the microphone, introduce yourself, and if you are representing an organization, please share with us which one. You may direct your question to any or all legislators, and if you have a second question, please wait until all other questions have been asked. Legislators each have 2 minutes to respond, and out of respect for all present, please do not interrupt speakers. All right, we will get started. So the league question, please give us an update on the mail-in ballot tracking and counting bills, Senate Bill 1241 and House File 608.
House File 608 passed, and I'm not sure the status of the Senate bill, but our bill was debated in the House and passed unanimously. I don't think there was anybody in opposition to that one at all. So we're in good shape in the House.
The Senate has a little bit crazier bill. It would outlaw having a polling place in a state building. And if you think of communities where we have state buildings with polling, they're in our university communities. So that's a big one that we've heard a lot about. I think Senator Smith, who has that bill, is having some trouble with some of his members on that bill. So I guess we'll see if that comes forward or not. But he has some unique ideas about voter participation.
And Kelly, just to be clear, the bill that we passed did not have all of that other stuff in it, which we call voter suppression. It really just dealt with the barcode and the idea that auditors would all be required to count that barcode, and that would be the official determination on whether a ballot was turned in on time. So I know in the Senate file, they had a drop dead date that if you didn't have your ballot in by election day, then it didn't count. And we said, it shouldn't be up to the post office to determine whether our ballots count or not, especially if a voter turned it in on time. So I think the House file, I'm hoping it'll get a hearing in the Senate and they will take that seriously because it really does address the problem we had in northern Iowa with those ballots that were not counted. Even though they know they were mailed on time and came in before the election day, so, or on the election day. So those are the things that we're dealing with right now, and I'm hoping we'll get a resolution and we can pass the bill that really and truly will address the problem.
Thank you. All right, we will go to our co-sponsor questions. First up, Iowa City Federation of Labor.
Good morning. Thanks for coming. My name is Joe Marin. I'm speaking for the Iowa City Federation of Labor, which right now we've been merged into, we're a chapter of the Hawkeye Area Labor Council now. Earlier we got assurances in the media that IPERS was not going to be meddled with in any way. And now we've learned that you can never take your eyes off the ball with these folks. And in the last couple of days, there's been rumors of a sort of a backdoor. It sounds fairly complex, but our question is, can you pledge to work to maintain the integrity of the IPERS system?
I think the bill that you're referencing, Joe, is House Study Bill 165. It started out as a benign or a general shell-type bill that people thought was going to be the vehicle to help our mental health system, both adults and children. But after rereading the bill, and the First Amendment to be proposed on the bill came out last week, it appears that it is not for mental health, that it indeed is looking at a couple things. As I mentioned before, capping property tax rates, but also capping or reducing IPERS and 411 eligibility. In other words, the amount of dollars that can be put into those systems. So that First Amendment, which has not been added to the bill yet, did appear to deeply affect IPERS and the 411 system, and frankly, our residential property tax values. So this is a moving target that, thanks for watching, and keep an eye on it, especially next week.
Okay, all right, well, thanks.
And you asked for our commitment, you got it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, next up is United Way.
Good morning, Patty Fields, the United Way. First of all, thank you to the League for your continued partnership, and thank all of you for your service to our communities. I'm actually here with a question about House Senate File 438, the health screenings bill. As one of the founding organizations of the school-based health clinics here in the area, it's in its 12th year. We know that it takes all of us working together to meet those health, dental, and oral needs and vision needs of students. And with this bill, there will be kids who fall through the cracks simply because their parents don't have the financial resources. And kids who are unable to see clearly, are experiencing oral pain, or have untreated health needs will not be ready to learn in the classroom. So since I know it passed this week out of the Senate and it's going to the House, where do we go from here? Because this is a really important bill for a lot of people.
Can I just speak briefly to the bill overall? I worked on this in the Education Committee in the Senate side. This is the bill that originally was going to end the requirement for school districts to have teacher librarians and school nurses. Thankfully, we were able to amend that out of the bill, but this bill did pass the Senate, and essentially, there is still theoretically a requirement for some of these health screenings, but now the school is no longer working with parents to ensure that that requirement is met, and that is exactly why kids will be falling through the cracks, because now theoretically, we're going to be requiring the Iowa Department of Public Health to be the ones following up with this, but there's no way that bureaucrats in Des Moines are going to be able to follow in kind of far-flung towns and cities all over the state these health screenings, and that's why we went with the schools, because they are the local folks, they are the folks who people we're dealing with. And I want to say specifically on the blood lead piece, 1 in 5 Iowa newborns in 2017, not 1967, 2017 was born with an actionable level of blood lead in their system. And so this is going to have, I think, really negative, this is not an urban issue or a rural issue, this is an Iowa issue. And so I'm really worried about this, and I hope there's some good news in the House, because this is unconscionable, and I do not understand what the Republicans think is going to happen when this bill, if it does become law.
And Patty, I can just speak to one of the concerns we have is putting it back on the counties and having it be an unfunded mandate. And the counties don't have the personnel to basically monitor, thousands and thousands of student records like that. And that's where the kids will fall through the cracks. Your point's well taken. And we will fight that tooth and nail, because we understand you can't teach a child who's not healthy. And we need to have those screenings and to be able to track them well, for us to be able to know that a child is coming to school with all of that in place. And whether it's dental or vision or hearing, all of those screenings, and in fact, a lot of them are done by our AEAs. So for us not to keep those records, that doesn't even make sense. And we partner with the county public health system and the state public health system to make sure that all those records are there. It is our responsibility, and I think school districts shouldn't shirk that or be trying to get out from under that, in light of the fact that that provides a healthy child at the school to be able to learn. So thanks for your advocacy, and for the clinics. Those clinics have been a lifesaver for so many of our students, and we know that. We have seen the benefits of that. We're a role model for other states, other counties in the state, in terms of how to set those up and why, again, they're so critical. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patty, and thank for your work with United Way. It's really a stupid bill, but anyway, without getting into the weeds on it, what you'll hear many times from House members now, and this is important with you being with United Way, are the floods in western Iowa, the potential floods across Iowa, and there's somewhat of a freeze in thinking, a freeze in funding, until we see the totality of circumstances from the flooding. Now, that was a reason given on the floor to not fund the children's mental health right now, because we don't know what the budget concerns are over flooding. I think the children's mental health is a priority that we move forward with, and I too voted no, because it's a system, and it's a system without funding. But as far as the cost of children's screenings, really, we have to do it. And I think that bill, I don't know what committee did it come through in the Senate? Do you remember by any chance?
Education, I think it was.
Education would be the guess, so we'll see how that plays in Education Committee in the House level. But we'll do everything we can to change it or just have it not move.
Great, thank you.
It's the lobbyist for the School Board Association is the person that was really pushing this legislation. And being a former school board member, I don't understand where these are children that are struggling many times, their families, and I just did not get this bill. Why we're not requiring these things to be done, because it's for their betterment, the kids.
Is that lobby's name Emily?
Is it Emily?
She is.
Because it would be nice, some reverse advocacy. All the legislators should write her a letter and send her a note saying this is a dumb bill, and I don't know how you can represent the school boards or anyone else, especially the children, and sponsor a bill like this. So that's Emily Piper, Piper.
And I can speak briefly to the kind of origination of this bill. There was a multi-year process where the chairwoman of the Education Committee, Senator Amy Sinclair, was working with folks in the education lobby, right? So the school boards and the educators and what have you, trying to figure out how do you lessen the administrative burden, what have you, that exists for some school districts, and giving them the ability to make some of these choices. And it was interesting, when we were on the floor debating this, we kept hearing that teachers are spending all of their weekend doing paperwork for these various, and the teachers I know spend their weekends grading papers because there aren't enough teachers in our classrooms. And so I think that they have this is a solution looking for a problem, when the real problem is that, for however many years in a row now it is, we've been underfunding our schools with 2% growth, and you need a 2.6% just to keep up with inflation. That's the real problem, not this
Screenings.
screenings, yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, ACLU.
Wish Bobby was here.
Hi, my name is Martha Hampel. I'm representing the Hawkeye chapter of the ACLU of Iowa. I just want to thank you all for being here and thank the League of Women Voters. So I have a general question on something Senator Bolcom touched on, Senate File 575, the elections bill that would change our rules and restrict them, restrict voting, basically. I won't go into all the various restrictions, but what we know now is that it has passed subcommittee and it's on the calendar. I never know what that means. It's on the calendar, or where the calendar is. If you could elaborate on the bill a little bit, and when it will be in front of you, just give us some more information about what we can do as voters to give input on that.
Yeah, so it's a Senate state government bill. It apparently is it out of committee? I wasn't aware it was out of committee. It is out of committee. So if it's on the calendar, bills that get out, there's the calendar, and those are bills essentially that have passed out of a committee. And so that's like every bill that's passed out of a committee. And then there's something called the debate calendar, which is these are the things that are going to be debated. And that's usually prepared a day or so, maybe even 12 hours before the actual debate. So the calendar, it's available to be debated, and it would require the majority leader in the Senate to say, we've got the votes, everybody's ready, here we go. And then it goes on to the actual daily debate calendar. And we have the debate calendar in the Senate. It's been published Friday. So we know what we're going to debate when we go back Monday, at least what they think they're going to debate. Sometimes things get pulled from that. It essentially works the same way in the House. So what we've heard, kind of, sometimes you get rumors about what's going on in the other caucus about Senator Smith has some of his members uneasy with the bill. Typically, when a bill gets put on the debate calendar, the majority leader knows, he's talked to the chair of the committee or who's running the bill, and they know they've got the votes they've got among their members, because the majority leader doesn't put anything on the daily debate calendar that he doesn't, in this case, Senator Whitfer, doesn't have the votes to pass. They never rely on our votes, so apparently this has been bogged down by some whatever, and I don't know the concerns. I would imagine most of the members would be fine if people in Iowa City and Ames and Cedar Falls weren't able to vote in state buildings, because if you think about that, who does that help? It or hurt? Governor Reynolds did not win Johnson County because people can vote on our campus and at the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics. That isn't going to change. She's not going to win Johnson County, or statewide Republicans aren't going to win Johnson County in the future if that changes. So I guess it remains, well, the good news is it's not on the daily debate calendar yet, and hopefully it's just bogged down and people will see the benefit of taking up what seems to be a much more reasonable House bill on elections.
It's kind of interesting because Senator Smith has got the Republican Party fighting among themselves on this particular issue, and there's a lot of disagreement within their own party, and when he got told that it was not coming to the floor the day that it was supposed to, he became very upset, and and he's bringing bills that are just unrealistic this year. That he's bringing bills that are already in code, and eluding and theft and all the things that he's bringing these bills forward on. It's like, we can do this. Why are we duplicating this in the code? And there's been a lot of disagreement with him in the last 2 to 3 weeks, and it's actually kind of interesting to follow.
We don't have much fun up there, so this is kind of fun.
I was actually out in the rotunda yelling and screaming. I go, oh, that's very
Interesting.
becoming of a elected person to sit out there and yell at people. Sorry, that doesn't help you a lot, but it kind of keeps us amused.
Martha, the good news, so it did pass the state government committee on a party line vote, and usually if something passes on a party line vote, it's, it's moving pretty fast. So the fact that it's slowing down, they're pumping the brakes, that's a very good sign. And it sounds like the bill in the House, that's kind of not quite a companion, but not companion at all, not at all, but dealing kind of,
we do is the ballot.
okay. And so
Not even
Nothing else.
thankfully,
Yes,
I think it's
nothing
probably
else.
unlikely this becomes, hopefully, law, but people need to keep emailing and
That's
speaking up, for
specifically
sure.
my question, as far as the timeline and the calendar, do voters still have time to?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
I think the outcome of the special election last Tuesday weighs heavily upon that bill too, because it was kind of a backlash with students up at UNI that were very upset that their voting rights were being proposed to be restricted, and so they reacted in a different way. They came out to vote.
He has until April 4th to get that bill out of the Senate. Senator Smith does. So
Great.
That's the next, deadline.
Thank
And
you.
you have till April 4th to keep him from getting out of the Senate.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Martha.
Thank you for your question. Next up is the Affordable Housing Coalition.
Morning. My name is John McKinstry, President of the Affordable Housing Coalition. Thank you all for the work that you do. I'd like to thank Representative Masher for mentioning already the rental cap, and Senator Walz for mentioning the Housing Trust Fund. Approximately 16,000 Johnson County households pay more than they can afford for their housing. At the Housing Coalition, we are bringing many community stakeholders together to advocate for new solutions and to protect the progress that has already been made. Several forms of state-level funding for affordable housing are needed to fuel the creation and maintenance of more affordable housing units. An example of a new solution would be the creation of state low-income housing tax credits, similar to those available in neighboring states. And locally, we have won some very significant gains in affordable housing. We have inclusionary zoning in Iowa City, the first in the state. Also, Iowa City has fair housing protection for renters who use Section 8 vouchers. We ask, all of you, would you support the creation of a state low-income housing tax credit or other new solutions? And what work needs to be done to protect recent local advancements from being undermined by the Iowa State Legislature?
We currently, John, you can probably fill us in on this. We currently have a workforce housing tax credit, which I assume is different than, and it's allegedly, and it's very well used, and the governor's proposed adding more to that and putting actually even more towards a rural set aside, because it's an issue in smaller communities as well. But it's focused on what so-called workforce housing, which
I
doesn't
think we'd be
necessarily.
aiming at something
Yeah.
for lower income.
Yeah,
than-
it wouldn't necessarily mean assistance to developers that do low-income work.
Right.
I think it's a great idea. The question is, what's the cost against
Okay.
other things that we spend money on, because it has to shore up against education funding and all the other things we spend
Yes.
money on. But it's clearly a need, and it's not only a need in places like Johnson County, but across the state.
I think it's something that we should look at. We should also look at the money that's being spent to pay a lawsuit that kind of come out of that fund of, I believe it was about $4 million to pay a sexual harassment lawsuit for IFA. That money is not going to our communities now for affordable housing. I would have much rather seen that money go towards affordable housing, but it's something that I would look at. Joe's very much right that you have to see how it fits in with all the other tax credits and so forth.
I think the workforce housing tax credit has been successful. One of the things they're trying to move around is how to implement it more in rural areas. One of the suggestions is make it, but those tax credits competitive, which could be an interesting, if you have someone shovel-ready in eastern Johnson County, does that mean they're put on hold to wait to see if Calhoun County is going to develop a project? So it's that balancing act, and the governor does have a tremendous focus on communities of 15,000 and less. The second thing is that you're probably already aware of, John, this coming summer is supposed to be the in-depth review of all tax credits that the state participates in. So in a way, it's kind of hard to implement a new one when we're supposed to be reviewing the others. But on a positive note, I think your low-income housing tax credit would be much easier to show the investment and the outcome than possibly some of the other tax credits that were initiated in the state of Iowa. So
Been
I think
very
it's a-
successful all the way across the country
I think it's a
federally, so.
Great idea. The balance is urban and rural. Can we show where it really works here and also where it works in a different area?
John, I was just going to mention, I had attended a lecture at the Green Room about a little over a year ago with a state senator who was, before he was a state senator,
Right.
addressed that
I was
whole
there too.
issue. I figured you would have been. But it was the whole issue of affordable housing and how do we create that? Because if you don't have that stability for individuals, then you have the chronic issues of homelessness and people in emergency rooms and people not getting their basic needs met. Johnson County has been a model for how to go about that, and we have our new housing center that was created for those people, and we are doing more in that area than probably a lot of other counties. So I appreciate the fact that you've worked with the county, you've worked with the city to be able to create those ordinances and to make sure that we are moving in the right direction. I've worked on the Habitat homes with our Women with Hammers group, and they have been wonderful with making sure, again, that people who come to our community have good places to live, and that these are homes that they can be proud of, and that they very rarely have any defaults on those loans.
Yes.
And I think that speaks to the fact that you also educate people about how to manage their money and their budgets. And I know that Habitat works with them, and so does your coalition,
Yep.
in terms of making sure people have the tools to be able to keep that home. So I think we've been doing some good things here. I would support a tax credit of that nature, and I'm not sure we have people in the legislature right now who are of the same ilk that we are.
Right.
And that's what we need to change.
Yeah, John, first of all, I say thank you for what you do. We've got some really incredible advocates in our community. Chrissy Canganelli over at Shelter House, really, life-saving work. That 16,000 number you mentioned, is that folks who are paying 30% or more of their
Yes.
household income on?
And
okay.
I think that's been for 50 years the standard.
Yep. And so, that's something that I'm acutely aware of. If there's anybody in the audience who wants to learn more about some of the challenges folks are going through, there's a terrific book you can read entitled Evicted. And it just kind of walks you through the housing crisis that is not just in our state, but really in our country. And it's a really searing look. I think the things that we're doing in our community are really important. The inclusionary zoning that's such an important tool. And I think it's really important to your question that we protect that from state interference, which we talked about at our last forum from folks in Des Moines. So if that was ever under attack, I would be working very hard to protect the ability of our communities to engage in inclusionary zoning. I did have a conversation a few weeks ago with a gentleman from the Des Moines Housing Partnership. There is some interest in this at the state level, I think, to build
Yes.
a multifaceted coalition, take some time during the interim, to talk more about this as kind of from the advocacy perspective and figure out what are the specific requests for the legislature on top of the expansion of the workforce housing tax credit and trying to really get a good grasp. I think that would be a terrific step in the right direction. I would love to be a part of that. The bill that I've proposed would reallocate some of the real estate transfer tax. So currently, when you buy a home, you pay a little bit of money at the very end. That's the transfer tax. Currently, most of that money actually goes just to the general fund for the state. And I think that if that's coming from the housing sector, let's keep it in the housing area, apportion more of that for affordable housing trusts, more for shelter assistance grants. Let's figure out how we can use the funds that are being generated in the housing sector to make housing more affordable, because I strongly believe the rent is too damn high.
And John, just another comment. Because we're a college town, we're competing with all of those college students who are renting as well. And
Yes.
so our occupancy rates are 97, 95%, which is unprecedented as well. So it creates that other problem of the competition for that low-income housing to make sure that it's affordable not only for students, but for our people who are living and working here.
Yes. Okay.
We also need new housing. Is Ben Carson still our Secretary of HUD? Is he still? Okay, yeah. I mean, so, yeah, I'm sorry. Sometimes, it's like you just have to, it feels like you're kind of in a bit of a dream.
I don't think he's been indicted yet, no.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, we need more federal support. I mean, HUD has been underinvesting in LIHTC for
Yes.
decades, and you'd think the developer president could lead on this issue if he was so inclined, but
Yeah, you'd think that.
anyway.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you. And last up, Iowa Shares.
Thank you. Thanks to the League of Women Voters, and thank you all for what you're doing and for being here. My name is Holly Hart. I'm representing Iowa Shares. And thank you also, Representative Kinney, or Senator Kinney? No.
Senator.
For mentioning, I know, now I'm in trouble. Good thing I'm not at, good thing. Well, for describing the bills coming out as you have, because I thought it was just me, and thinking, wasn't that there before? I have a quick follow-up question for this, but first of all, it was between the bottle bill or the one that the ACLU asked about. But there have been several of these bills that are just nutty. And it's like passive-aggressive restatement of what's already in Iowa law, as if it's not really there already, and then adding weird things to it. That Bill 575 also, you may not be aware, but potentially discriminates against people with certain kinds of disabilities. Maybe, I don't know, but that was one more thing. But with the proliferation of these kinds of bills, all coming from the ALEC template, Ag-Gag and a few others, it seems like there are constitutional issues that would raise either constitutional questions or lawsuits. My question to you is, what are your thoughts about the possibility of appeals, judiciary, and the possibility of lawsuits or constitutional overruling of some of these bills, should they pass?
I think that's why you're seeing the push for the judicial nominating
Well, yeah.
reform. Because they know that they're passing unconstitutional bills, and if they can't win that way, they'll just stack the courts.
Okay.
Just to give that a little bit more context with the judicial nominate, so currently, our current system, 1959, 1958, we decide that we want to stop electing judges, and we want a new system that is merit-based. And so the bipartisan constitutional amendment goes to the voters, we approve it. Republicans want to do an end run around that constitutional amendment process because there's one line in the law that is kind of provides this weird loophole technicality. And so they want to use that one line to overturn the will of the voters. And instead of having basically attorneys' co-workers serve as the people who help to nominate the judges, they want to put us, legislators, in charge of figuring out who should be on those nominating commissions. So it's very easy, I think, to see how if you're passing this bill that you think is maybe unconstitutional, but you want to make sure that you get a judge in there who's going to vote with your belief or legislative intent, whatever that may be, very easy to see how you can have lawmakers trying to pick judges not based on their ability to do their job, but whether or not they share their worldview, and putting them on the bench rather than the current system, which I think is much better at. And Republicans will tell you that they're trying to take politics out of it because they look at the Varnum decision in 2009 that recognized marriage equality and the recent decision to overturn Iowa's fetal heartbeat ban and say, oh, activist judges at it again. The Varnum decision was, we were like 7 years ahead of the federal system, and we were like 40 years behind the Roe decision. So this idea that Iowa is somehow, liberal activist judges is ridiculous. But I think Representative Nielsen is absolutely right. That's exactly what's happening here.
Julian Garrett, who ran the judicial nominating bill, had a bill last year that would require a supermajority of the Iowa Supreme Court to overturn any piece of legislation that was written, his idea didn't go forward, but he's got some pretty far out ideas. He's an attorney. I don't know. He's just aggrieved by the current system. And as we debated the bill, I mean, there's no guarantee under this new system that Julian Garrett isn't going to disagree with a decision or two of the courts. And it's like, then what, right? Julian, and I don't know if he got passed over for a judgeship or what the energy behind that is, but sometimes
It should be passed over.
things like that happen. But it's a disaster what they've done to the courts, and I hope that the House is turned into the place of moderation and sensibility, right? But
We're screwed.
So no gerrymandering bill yet?
It's coming.
That'll be coming.
Quick follow-up.
That'll be coming. But it's important because both Representative Nielsen and Senator Walz mentioned that what they're trying to do now usurps the will of the people, the vote that took place decades ago. What they're trying to do is change the system without bringing it to Iowa voters. And if you really want to make a change, then if you have the power, then get it out so every Iowan can vote on this change.
And Holly, one interesting historical note, this was back in 1950, in the late 1950s, early 1960s, when this was being pushed. It was actually endorsed by wide-eyed leftist radical communist, then Iowa House Representative Chuck Grassley. So, that's kind of where we are.
Holly, in regards to the gerrymandering, I think one of the things we need to be really careful about, I don't know that they're going to change it because current law is such that we have a map that is given to us by the non-partial, impartial LSA, our Legislative Service Agency, and we can look at that map and say yay or nay. So if we say nay, then they come up with a second map. And we look at that map and we say yay or nay. If we say nay, the third map can be amended. The first two cannot. The first two maps cannot be amended, but the third map can be. And that's where I think they're going to be pushing to change. And that's where originally I thought it automatically went to the Supreme Court. It does not. And so
That's
I think we ought to change that. I know the league was involved in the first go-around when we made, the system that we have now. But I was under the impression on the third map that it automatically went to the Supreme Court. It does not. The third map can be amended. And once they start amending, Katie, bar the door. It's going to be ugly. And they are going to recreate the map of Iowa so that one party will always be in control, and that's a problem.
Yeah, yeah, interesting.
So something to think about for us to look at.
In other states, they're fighting for the system we have.
I
We're the
realize
only-
that, but I don't know if they realize that we have the system where third time around, you can make changes
Wow.
to it and do what you want.
Interesting.
So, thank you.
Can I have a very quick follow-up question? I'll just get in line, then, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll take it to the audience if any audience members have questions.
So just real quick, the point of that story, go ahead, Lynn, is get out of Johnson County in 2020 and elect some more Democrats to the House, please. We need help.
Go ahead.
My name is Lynn Gallagher. I live near Solon. I just had a question. The ag-gag law that we had before was found to be unconstitutional. It was thrown out for being a violation of First Amendment speech rights. And I was really disappointed when Tom Miller appealed it. And I don't know how much that's going to cost. But then I was disappointed a second time when there was a new law passed, which is probably going to be unconstitutional too. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it, anybody that wants to talk about why you did or didn't vote for it and what you think.
One of the things with this particular bill, it was there's a similar bill that has withstood the Federal Court of Appeals where this was overthrown, and that comes out of the Ninth Circuit out of, I believe, Oregon?
So the law was in Idaho, but the
Idaho.
Ninth Circuit's based in San Francisco.
And it's withstood. It is not going after your First Amendment rights for freedom of speech. It's going after someone that is doing a deceptive practice. And that's the part of this. It's an act in which a person is trying to come into a facility. So that's the big difference. And it has withstood federal scrutiny where the other old law did not.
If to do investigative reporting or to find out what's really going on someplace, it often takes someone going into a business facility, whatever, like a reporter or journalist or whatever, and not disclosing why they're going there. So, I mean, I think this makes a special case for ag, like they're going to be protected where other places weren't. We already have trespassing laws, et cetera, so I don't really see the need for this.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Eleanor Levin, a League member and concerned citizen. And I generally tend to listen more than speak at these kinds of things because I think there are a lot of people who have their focused issue. But something that's been coming up in my mind over and over for literally since the last forum for the past month, talking about the strict scrutiny, of course, this is super important to be aware of that specific language, but is there any conversation going on about the fact that the federal Second Amendment is not entirely clear? There are problems with that language. Does anyone ever bring that up?
You know, we got a lecture on the Senate floor from Julian Garrett, if I'm remembering correctly. You might detect a theme here about how the Second Amendment has some kind of preamble in it, the militia piece. No. Is the honest truth, Eleanor?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no.
It's an annual debate between Representative Brian Meyer, a Democrat, and Representative Matt Winschittel, Republican. And every year when we have any bill with guns as part of the discussion, it is the same Second Amendment discussion. And you might want to go back and listen to some of those debates because they are pretty good.
You know, it was kind of, last year, I did vote for this because it was going to go to the people to be able to vote on. I learned more this year from other states that there are a couple other states that have the strict scrutiny in their constitution now. And the laws or the court cases now that are coming and how they're attacking the other gun legislation and how these other gun legislation is getting overturned because of the strict scrutiny. So I switched because of that reason.
And just a comment, you know, I look at what New Zealand did, and the ability to say enough is enough. We're not going to do this anymore, and our people are unsafe.
One is enough.
Yeah, and so I hate that we continually have this discussion as if Second Amendment rights are more important than our rights to live. And that just doesn't make sense to me. We should be able to have common sense gun laws and still say people have the right to carry and have a gun. I grew up in a family of hunters and people who had guns. I'm not anti-gun, but I am a proponent of common sense gun laws. And we have lost that ability. And that's extremely concerning in light of the fact that our kids are finally saying, we're not putting up with this anymore. We're not going to go along with that. We're going to change who's in there making the decisions if they don't represent us.
Just a reminder, this is the first General Assembly it's passed. It has to go through another General Assembly. Originally, this would have been the second, but the Secretary of State botched it. So, if he's going to make a mistake, I'm all right with this one. But, you know, and he should have counted the votes in Winneshiek County. But, so this is just the first General Assembly. It'll be required to go through another one. So 2020 is so very important.
One of the things one of the energy around this that's concerning to me is kind of this anti-government narrative that surrounds this debate. You know, you have kind of a range of, you know, everybody up here, I think, supports the Second Amendment rights of people to bear and have guns, whether they want to hunt, whether they want to target shoot, whether they want to collect guns. And so you've got that, but we also have folks that see a role for arming an unorganized militia, people that would be armed and have the ammunition needed when the day comes when we're going to overthrow the government. And there was a fair amount of debate, you know, people alluding, not saying that quite as explicitly as I have, but there are folks that think that they should have access to anything the military has. We had a little bit of conversation, well, that's not really that. But if this issue's been around long enough that people have come to the Capitol and you get into conversations with people and it gets to that. I remember after Sandy Hook, Senator Joni Ernst, then state senator, got up on the floor and talked about, we better be careful, we're not going to control guns after Sandy Hook, we need to respect the rights of the unorganized militia. And it was like, what is she talking about, right? So it came, Senator Carlin brought it up, but there's a very strong anti-government theme out there, and having hardware and bullets is part of that. And I don't know, I mean, President Trump in the last couple of weeks has kind of alluded to, you know, his people maybe needing to take to the streets if things get a little goofy for him, right?
He does whenever things get.
So you've got this kind of sensible, what's our rights not to be murdered, right? Or our family members to be murdered against this constitutional right. And I don't know if this is a great analogy. It's not really a great analogy because smoking isn't constitutionally protected right. But there was a time when we were debating smoking and the impact of smoking on folks. And it came around, can you be in a bar or restaurant and smoke? I don't smoke. I don't want to be around smokers. And business owners saying, we have this right, and of course, smokers' rights, right? And when the narrative went away from the rights of smokers to smoke wherever they wanted to smoke, gun owners owning guns wherever they want to own them, to protecting from secondhand smoke the cancer and the death caused by this activity, we changed the conversation. We made some policies that actually protected all of us from being murdered, said smokers certainly have rights, but they don't have rights. Their rights don't supersede our rights. And I'm not sure how we change that dynamic. I'm not sure it's the greatest analogy, but we are the sensible people. Even, I mean, the majority of gun owners, majority of NRA folks want background checks. And we can't even have we can't even really have that conversation in any meaningful way.
The NRA thinks the Iowa Firearms Coalition is like out there. And they're the ones who are driving the train here. What did you say? The National Rifle Association thinks that the Iowa Firearms Coalition, and it's the IFC that's driving the train on this, the NRA thinks that those folks are out there.
Meaning out of touch with reality.
So,
It's the Iowa Gun Owners.
I mean, and it was wasn't it Steve King? Just, it would not be hard to find, I'm sure. It was, I think, earlier this week, right? Steve King had a meme he shared on Facebook about 8 trillion bullets. And I'm pretty sure Iowa was in the group of states that it was. Yeah, I don't know, Eleanor. I wish I had better news for you.
Thank you.
Eleanor, thanks.
Moms Demand Action's coming to the Capitol on Monday to lobby, which is good.
Good morning, and thank you all for your service. I'm Mike Carberry, and I wear a lot of hats, but today I'm wearing the one that I'm on the board of the Iowa Hemp Industries Association, and I'd like to thank Senator Bolcom for all your work on cannabis, and Kevin Kinney as well. Senator Kinney done a lot of great work on the hemp bill. One of the things about hemp, I mean, it's a miracle fiber. There's over 3,000 uses for hemp, and a lot of them it can replace a lot of other products that are currently made with fossil fuels and other things. Well, we have a farm crisis going on right now. We have a record number of bankruptcies since the farming crisis of '08, or the Great Recession, and then the farming crisis that we had in, I believe that was the '80s. So hemp can be that product that maybe can help pull us out of the farm crisis, to give us another product other than corn and beans. And here's my constitutionally, I'm mandated to mention water quality at every meeting I go to, so it's really good for water quality as well. One of the things that we're concerned about, though, in the hemp industries is the limit of 40 acres to grow. If we limit 40 acres, we're going to get kicked to the curb a lot of places by other states that are not going to limit our farmers to 40 acres on hemp. And I'd just like to hear your thoughts on possibly amending the hemp bill to eliminate the 40-acre rule. Did you get that?
That's one of the things that I actually wanted to put in.
Uh-huh.
Because there's a couple very large companies that would like to come into the state of Iowa and monopolize this, not giving the smaller producers the opportunity to grow hemp. They would monopolize the market. And this is one of the things that, while we're setting this up, it's supposed to be reviewed in 3 years, in which, at that time, you can expand the acres. We're trying to get these facilities, production facilities, set up so we just don't have one mega facility, say in Des Moines, Iowa, that is going to be producing the majority of hemp in Iowa. We don't want to try to get this and spread this out to all of Iowa. And that's the theory behind this, that it is, we specifically knew that, and we're going to come back in 3 years and revisit that.
So I've had the opportunity to work with Senator Kinney on this in subcommittee and in the Agriculture Committee. I was actually in the room when we were talking with the drafters and the Republicans, and that group put that language in there, 40 acres per licensed entity. And the whole point of that, as Senator Kinney said, is to make sure that we're, to borrow a phrase, kind of spreading the wealth around a little bit. We don't want just a couple producers to go all in, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 acres. I totally understand the association's point of view on this. I think that because hemp, the potential here is potentially, it's very high, right? The incomes are going to be good. And we want to make sure, to your point about the farm crisis, and the fact that incomes are slipping for lots of reasons, that smaller producers are able to benefit from this opportunity. And if it's not working in 3 years, we'll come back to it, we'll expand it. You know, that's the whole point of lawmaking, right? You can tweak things if it's not working. But we want to, I think the goal from the outset is to make sure that small producers, and by the way, I see Kate and Carmen in the back. The 40 acres here is different from the other 40 acres issue that we're dealing with. No, we're good.
Yeah, that's why I winked at him earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. But we want to make sure that if you are a licensed entity, you're growing hemp, you're not going to be able to swamp out everybody else in the beginning stages. We'll see how the market evolves over time for sure.
Thank you.
Yep,
The
absolutely.
discussion on the hemp bill in the House is the same. We're kind of frozen on the 40. I'd rather have 40 than 0.
Right.
You know, but do we want hemp CAFOs? But
No.
I think it's important for us to get it out and do the review. I didn't realize it was 3 years out, but, you know, it's interesting that we don't want big companies to come in unless they're Apple or Google, but that we're gonna start at 40. Watch the movie What About Bob? We're taking baby steps. But this is kind of a compromise that it's gonna take to get it through from what I see right now in the House and Ways and Means.
Yeah, I think it's great, the great work that's been done on this and the limitation. I mean, we tend to incrementally do things, and this is kind of a new big thing we're doing. There's a bit of a bifurcation on this issue in the sense that people are going to produce hemp for fiber, and then there's going to be people that grow a slightly different plant for CBD oil, which is really where I think the money's to be made. One of the issues I think we're going to have to deal with in the next 3 years is figure out what the testing's going to be for CBD oil, because it's no THC, low THC, but around the country there's been reports about people that are buying CBD oil in businesses that is basically it's an untested product. There's no testing requirements for it. They found lead and pesticides and contaminants in it, where you go to the health food store and there's your CBD. And because I think we're going to see CBD in things like Coke and all sorts of products. I mean, I think it's coming to this thing where we're going to have like lots of products. I think in Iowa we're going to have to figure out, and testing's really expensive, but I think that's an issue that we're going to have to deal with at some point, where these products are going to be consumed by humans, that we're going to have a much more rigorous FDA kind of like testing of those materials. The advertisements and the labeling of the materials that people are buying now just don't comport with necessarily what they're getting in those containers. So it's an issue we're setting aside for the moment, but it's one that's probably going to come back as this industry develops.
Very good point. Thank you all.
Morning. I'm wondering if you all supported or support a $1.50 increase in the tobacco tax per pack and electronic cigarettes being taxed in a similar fashion, and also the prohibiting of smoking those devices in public spaces like the Smoke Free Air Act already covers. So I'd like you all to talk a little bit about that.
Banning smoking in casinos.
I did
We've
forget
been
that
working
one. I
on
had a
that one,
lot.
too.
I wanted to condense, yes.
So, yes, I support all of those things. I think a number of us have sponsored legislation
Yeah.
to do just that. I think you probably knew that,
Yeah.
right? So thank you for your efforts, and we're going to continue to work on it. But we need, as Amy said before, a new legislature
Yeah.
in order for some of those things to happen. Thanks.
Thanks.
Is it still morning?
Despite
Somewhere.
My name's, excuse me, my name is Kevin Samick, and I live in Solon. And I have a question. You've seen in the news that the Virginia governor was talking about passing a law called infanticide, actually having a baby aborted, sit over here, taken really good care of, and if the mother decides she wants to keep it, they'll make it alive again, and if she doesn't, they'll kill it. Well, it was put down in Virginia. However, New York passed it, And I guess my question is that really what Roe versus Wade was about?
I don't think so. I don't think Roe versus Wade was about that.
Yeah, so where do you stand on that? I mean, I know there's been a lot of changes in Iowa as far as legalized abortion goes. I think for the better. How about the infanticide thing? Is that something that, if that came to you guys in Iowa?
I don't think that's something I'd support. I don't think we're going to see that in Iowa.
You never know.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see that in Iowa.
Well, I hope you're right. And thank you.
Lynn Gallagher, live near Solon. I don't know the bill number, but I know in addition to a bill that was going to have better regulation on commercial dog breeders, puppy mills, there's one to have better descriptions of animal abuse, neglect, stuff like that, and stronger penalties. And my understanding was it was moving well, and I just wondered where that is, if you know, and what kind of chance it has of passing.
Yeah, so there were two bills in the Senate, and I think there's a separate bill coming through the House that unfortunately Representative Kaufman, who's not here this morning, has been working on. There were the two bills in the Senate. There was one in agriculture and there was one in judiciary. I believe we amended the agriculture bill several times to strengthen it, and in fact, there were some folks, we had to override some folks who were concerned about maybe this bill was going too far, but we were able to get the amendment through with Democratic votes and some Republican votes, despite some Republican opposition. I still believe the judiciary bill is maybe a little stronger than the bill coming out of ag, but we'll be debating some kind of merger of the two, I presume, on the floor at some point soon, hopefully. It's going to depend on whether Senator Whitfer, who's the majority leader, wants to put that on the calendar, where he is doing his whip counts internally. I don't know a lot about the House bill.
But I can tell you about the House bill. It came through state government, Lynn, and Representative Kaufman was the chair of the subcommittee. I was on the committee as well. It passed out of subcommittee unanimously, and then it passed out of the state government committee unanimously. So it is on our calendar for debate right now. We have a judicial bill as well, which was the penalty part. What we didn't want to see was penalties for animal abuse more stringent than child abuse or domestic violence. And so that was part of the discussion, to make sure that we didn't put one over the other in terms of more harsh penalties for animal abuse, in light of the fact that when you create the harshest penalties possible, nobody enforces it, nobody charges anybody with it, because they can't get anybody convicted. And so it didn't make sense to do that. We want a workable law and penalties that are really going to address the issue. We also see a difference between hoarders and people who have mental health issues in terms of not being able to take care of their animals, and then people who are really and truly torturing animals. But a lot of them have been tortured as well. So you can see mental health issues in both of those groups. And so we want to make sure that we've got adequate penalties and treatment for individuals who are in those situations. But I know the puppy mill bill is a passion of Representative Kaufman, and I'm sure that one is going to go forward. The penalties, I don't think they'll be put in the same bill. I think they are two different issues, and I think they'll stay that way, at least in the House.
The way it looks, the only one that's moving right now in the Senate's Senate File 591.
That's the ag bill.
That's the one coming out of ag. I don't see where it made it out of
Judiciary?
judiciary.
The bill we have in ways is stalled,
Okay.
No, it's
So-
there. It passed the Senate.
And do you know what the reason is?
because the chairperson is Lee Hine.
Oh, okay.
So I talked to him because I'm on the bill, and asked if and when we're going to move the bill. And he said he had some serious concerns, and that he was working with the Senate to alleviate those concerns, but he was not optimistic that would make it out of the second funnel.
The other bill is live. It's Senate File 369, the companion animal cruelty bill, which is a little more comprehensive than the one coming out of ag.
Okay. Good morning. Meg Oberreiter. I live in Cedar Rapids, but I have a son that lives in a group home at Systems, and he's with Representative Masher and with Senator Bolcom, and I'm a Cedar Rapids person with Senator Hogue and Representative State. I will try to get through this with quickly. Did all of you get your book sent to you by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., How to End the Autism Epidemic? Can I have a show of hands?
I don't think so.
Our Representative Stade acknowledged that he got his. And so they were delivered to the Iowa. Senator Mathis told me on the election day weekend when I was working in the office that she figured that they were holding, that they were being held at the Capitol, which makes sense until the election was over and find out who went into place. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. paid for over 7,000 of these to be sent to every state legislator in the United States. And
I don't believe we've received them yet, Meg.
Okay, I will check with them, and I've ordered 5 more copies this morning, because it lays, and when I get them, I'll bring them to your offices. It lays out with the lawyers or the FOIA documents and the researchers on the lies and the cover-up. And I'm glad you said something about tobacco science, because that's exactly
Could we
the
get to a
science
question, please?
being used. So this is the book I want to see, and I'll get it to you when I'm done. I have another handout I'd like to leave with you about the 10 vaccine concerns every member of Congress should know. And I realize you folks aren't Congress, but it's the state level people that make the rules for the mandates. And I hope that you folks, and I know you both are not saying the other side of the bill with me, but we had a bill come in, 2 of them this year, that we had hoped would be passed to let parents that don't want to apply for a religious exemption have the option of a philosophical exemption. And I've been a strong Democrat all my life, most of the time, and it's the Republican side that we get more support from. So I hope that doesn't get brought out of subcommittee and put on the budget bill, which is how they got the meningitis thing. And afterwards, if you want to look at some of the other supporting by good reputable sources, to show that vaccines are a huge trigger for injury. And yeah, I had to turn around after, I made it only to Melrose today, and I had to pull off the highway 6 times with my son being aggressive. He apparently knew that this wasn't a good room for him to be in this morning. And yeah, so our autism vaccine is alive and well, and Systems is not doing a good job with my son, and we need to, and I've invited you folks to come and talk on the terrible crisis we have. And he's 39, so he's a 4 to 5 per 10,000 kid, and it's now 1 in 36 of our kids. And we don't have the money or the resources or the space to handle these needs, and we parents need help.
Thank you.
And the group homes need help.
Good morning. I'm Galen Wohlbetter, a member of Johnson County League, and my question has to do with what I think might be a positive thing happening, and I just want to ask you where it's at in each of your bodies. This is the Restoring Felon Voter Rights that Governor Reynolds is behind, and a constitutional amendment. Been a long-term league concern about restoring felon voter rights. So I would just like to find out where it's at and what lobbying perhaps we need to do to make sure that that goes through.
Well, I hate to crush your, you think this is a good topic stance there, Galen, but if the governor really wanted to restore felon voting rights, she could do it tomorrow, yesterday, Tuesday. She could sign an executive order restoring those just as they were taken away. And she could do that while we pursue the constitutional amendment. Yes. And I'm afraid that in the House, we're seeing an awful lot of conditions being attached to the restoration of those rights, like complete repayment of fees and restitution before those rights will be restored, which is ridiculous. And I'm sure that even more crazy, nutty things, as somebody earlier said, we have an awful lot of nutty bills. Nuttier things will be put on there to stop it, quite frankly.
I know it did come out of judiciary, and I know it's on the calendar as to whether it'll be debated or not. That's leadership in the House and the Senate that determine that. So those are the people I would start with in terms of lobbying.
I understand the governor could have done just by doing that automatically, but if we get a constitutional amendment, then
It's permanent.
right. And so, we understand in legislation, and the league certainly understands this, we have to go for the best we can do. Anything else to say on that?
You know where it is in the Senate?
I don't think it got out of judiciary in the Senate.
It did not,
So,
okay.
Look, I think probably almost every Democrat in the caucus wants to see this. We see this as a matter of justice. The Republican side has different values that they're ascribing to this. I think that there are the votes to pass it in the Senate. It's all going to come down to whether or not Republican leadership decides to put it onto the floor. Won't there be a vote?
Okay. And there's 2 weeks before the,
April 4th is.
Second.
thank you.
That's alive is in the House.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And the only one that's alive right now is in the House.
It's passed the House first and then comes over to the
It
Senate.
has to be debated on the floor.
In the House.
And then sent over to the Senate to still be a live round.
So, I mean, just in summary, you're a little bit discouraged that this can happen. Okay.
It would be nice if the governor stepped in and said, you can't reach agreement with a swipe of my pen. This is the baseline for restoring voting rights. And then you work it out over the next year, this year, next year, if you want to put the constitutional amendment or other parameters, but she could do it right now.
And Galen, there's a difference between saying I support a bill and then really working to get it done. She has a bully pulpit. Let's be honest about that. She wanted that done. She could have had it done by now. So that's why I get a little concerned about, well, the governor supports it. Yeah, well, so what? You've got to work for it, and you've got to go in and talk to the leadership and say that's a must-do for this session. I'm not hearing that.
And one of those bills, because there was a couple different bills in the Senate, one of the versions had that they wanted that I have some concerns on is restoring the right to bear arms with the voters' rights. And I've got an issue with that being a police officer, restoring those rights to bear arms or have firearms. And it was just one of the versions. So you've got to really read to see which version you're looking at, too.
Thank you for the reality check.
Sorry.
Well, on that, I mean, I think, when Governor Vilsack came in, he made an executive order. Representative Nielsen is actually right. The governor could make it so today. The other thing, before the session, I had an opportunity with Senator Dvorsky to visit Oakdale, and we visited with like 30 guests there at Oakdale who work on their paper, and we were talking about all these policy issues. And so at one point, it's like, how many of you guys are Republicans? And I was surprised to see how, I mean, like
2/3 of the room.
a lot of Republicans. And I don't know where all the energy is for legislative Republicans on this, if it's you've got to pay up the last cent you owe the state, or they think they're all Democrats that are going to start voting against them. But they'd be surprised how many people are their people who would like to vote.
Yeah, I think it's a punishment thing. They just want to punish people, and they think they can continue to punish them after they're out of prison, too. And it's one of the ways they do it.
Kind of a side story, when I ran the first time, I had 3 different individuals in which I put in prison that came back and wanted to help me with my campaign. Just because they couldn't vote for me, but they wanted to get involved, and that was something that they were looking at doing, and they thought that instead of being able to vote for me, they could help me. It was kind of very unusual, but
Only Kevin Kinney.
Yeah,
Yeah, only Kevin Kinney, yeah.
Hi, folks. I'm Lee Wood from West Branch, and I want to thank you all for what you're doing. You give me hope, and because I get pretty discouraged. I'm a past educator, and I'm a past union member of a school association in Ohio, and I'm very concerned about what's happening with education in the state of Iowa. I'm concerned that we're losing the unions for the teachers. It seems to me that if we can come up with money for public education, we can do better with the school systems, we can provide better programming, we can provide the teachers and the nurses and the support help that the schools need. Teachers need support help every day of the week. Their job is a hard job. My concern this week is hearing that Betsy DeVos had a private discussion with the governor. I'm wondering what's happening to the Sunshine Law. It seems to me that we should be able to know what's going on with that conversation. And I just want to say to you, please be concerned about what's going on between she and the governor. I just think education is so important, but I think public education needs to be funded so that we can really get top schools and get teachers to come here and get students to stay here to be teachers in the school system. So thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah.
You know what's sad is we would have never known that meeting happened if Betsy DeVos's office hadn't put it out, because our governor sure didn't.
Really?
Yeah. It was a Des Moines Register reporter that saw that this meeting was listed on Betsy DeVos's, I don't know, calendar or release, whatever she's doing. Yeah, her public calendar. And we would have never known. Not one Democratic lawmaker was invited.
Yes. I was
Not the
reading
ranking
that.
member of the House Education Committee, not the ranking member of the Senate Education Committee, and not even a House member was there. 2 Senate Republicans were the only electeds in the room, I believe. Someone from Americans for Prosperity, and some other private school lobbyists were in that meeting, and it is a farce for the governor and the Republicans to come out then and say that they think education is important, and that that we've been giving historic amounts of money to education, and it's just wrong. And the tale that they're spinning is so off base and wrong. And you're 1,000% right. We're not doing what we should be doing for public education. 92% of Iowa kids attend public schools, and our governor is spending her time talking to these private school activists. Yeah, we have much bigger things that we should be worrying about, and starting with improving our public schools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Sorry, that made me mad, so.
Yeah.
I just
No,
needed
it
to
just
vent.
gets to me. It just gets to me because I'm so strongly advocate for public education.
Every single person
Yeah.
up here is
If we
as
do
well.
something for it, they will be better. And we have so many good schools already that we need to use those. Keep that money coming in.
We
Thank
won't
you.
stop fighting for that, don't worry.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Okay,
Lee.
Thank you.
I just have one quick comment. I heard Mr. Walls say that Chuck Grassi was a communist. I don't think he's any more a communist than Nancy Pelosi, so we'll
Kevin, I want
we'll
to be clear,
square
that
off
was-
on that one.
That was a joke.
It was a joke.
I don't actually think that Senator Grassley's
Well-
a member of the left. My point was that even conservatives supported that change to the law. Conservatives and people who are actually fairly.
I know what your point was.
At that
but
point.
Sometimes that stuff gets printed and, there's a
Yeah,
lot of
fair
rhetoric.
enough.
There's a lot of rhetoric back and forth, so
Yeah,
I just wanted
my point
to
simply
make my point
was,
there.
I think it's important for people to know this was not a Democratic thing. This was not a Republican thing. This was not a conservative thing. This was not a liberal thing. Our judicial system was bipartisan. There was a massive bipartisan vote in favor of it when it went to the people, and Senator Grassley, then representative in the House, Grassley was supportive of it then too, and I'd be really curious what his position is on it today.
What's really too bad about that changing the judicial nominating process is that the courts are going to be commandeered by the folks that want to outlaw abortion and are still unhappy that gay folks can marry each other. Those are the two issues solely behind this change. It's going to upend the criminal court, it's going to upend the business court, it's going to upend the drug court, the mental health court, the probate court. We have a solid legal system in Iowa, and we're going to politicize it in a way that's just not necessary, because Bob Vanderplatz and the family leader is got too big a voice in this Iowa Republican Party.
Just so it doesn't get in print, Kevin, Nancy Pelosi's not a communist either.
Or a socialist.
No, yeah.
And this will be our last question.
Yeah, bipartisan banner.
Good morning. I love these forums. They're great. Thank you for everybody who makes sure that they happen and help us to have a voice and keep everyone informed. I am Lisa Green Douglas, and I have been aware of a lot of proposed legislation lately, both this year and last year, that is specific to county size. And it seems that that is really difficult to find an equitable application of that. I mean, I don't get it, and I wonder if you could explain that. But in kind of a lot of things that I'm seeing coming forward, don't you guys have sort of a checklist of legislation? For example, there's that one. There's also things that are already in direct contradiction to code. How can we prevent those? And then things that are proposed to get a rise out of a certain constituency. And can you do something about that kind of legislation? It just doesn't seem fair.
Elect Democrats.
I'm trying to do my best there.
One of the things that you guys, I believe, sent a resolution this week was on the
forestry?
The forestry, the 130,000 pound weight limits on county roads, where the county has
And bridges.
no authority on how the route would be dictated. You would apply for a permit from the DOT, and the DOT would grant these foresters to be able to carry a load of 130,000 pounds. This is, I was actually on the subcommittee in the Senate and have been arguing and fighting this ever since, because I felt that the counties should have a say on which the route should be if you're going to be granting this permit to how to get from point A to point B, because of the bridges and so forth. And to me, it's been one of those things with, I don't understand where they're coming from on this.
I don't even see who can win on that one. I tried to follow the money.
The guy who hired the lobbyist.
Yeah, but, okay, so the thing is, I mean, if those bridges fail, first of all, you got a huge public safety issue. But, you know, how is that going to benefit the logging companies
It's important
even?
to remember the short history of this. It's been tried, it's been attempted to get through transportation and local government committees for years.
Really?
It slipped its way into a standings bill, and now that's why we're kind of,
That's the one from last year for the dump
Yeah.
trucks.
well, that's the same thing, because you're talking axles and weight. So it's the same discussion, because we had the discussion for the forestry groups for years before, and transportation too. So the differential that Kevin's referencing is axles, weight, length of trucks, but it's still the same discussion. Help.
Yeah,
The
but,
county
okay, so
bridges.
specific though to that thing about county size and proposed legislation, you know, and yes, elect more Democrats. At the same time, you know, you go all throughout the code, you see it peppered in there about uniform application of various things. And how can you have that and then have this thing that's, well, you know, this is for counties under 15,000 population, and this is for counties over 80,000 population?
Lisa, it's a very targeted anti-Johnson County.
Well, yeah,
I
we
mean,
got that
I'm not
target
gonna,
on-
I
we
mean,
know that.
nobody wants to sugarcoat it
But-
because that's the reality. And so when they pass pieces of legislation like that, it is very definitely targeted towards us. And we get it, and we're not happy about it either. But until we change the makeup of the body, we're going to see more of this. It's Iowa City, it's Johnson County, we see it all the time.
But, okay, so that's where I'm going, though.
And
Isn't
it's
there
still
in
legal.
direct contradiction to the code?
It's still legal.
Like, it is?
Yeah.
I mean,
It isn't.
there are times when we use population to do good things.
Yeah,
We say
yeah.
a county of a population more than 100,000, here's something for you. Or with Polk County, sometimes we do things for Polk County. So you basically have to enumerate population. The thing you're talking about is a specific bill dealing with selection, or I mean, there may be
There's
more than
several.
one thing, but there's a selection of how we elect county board, members of the Board of Supervisors, right?
But there's also the one for under 15,000 for placement of telecommunications.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I think we are out of time. Thank you all to everyone with questions that attended and those with responses. This was a very informative session. And thank you to North Liberty for use of this facility. Also want to thank our co-sponsors, Iowa City Federation of Labor, United Way of Johnson and Washington Counties, Hawkeye Chapter of ACLU, Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition, and Iowa Shares, and to the local television staff for making this video cast. Rebroadcast of this forum will run on Iowa City Channel 4, Coral Vision, and North Liberty Television. On behalf of the league, thank you for your time today, and have a great weekend.